quite possibly the biggest change in Fort Collins real estate, probably in my entire lifetime, just happened and barely anybody knows about it. The Land Development Code, used to be Land Use Code, just got approved on November 1st, 2022, and is going to be effective come January 1st, 2023. And it impacts dramatically the entire landscape of the Fort Collins real estate moving forward into the future. What's up, everybody? My name is Patrick Soukup with Soukup Real Estate Services here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And if you're new to the YouTube channel, this is everything there is to know about Fort Collins, living in Fort Collins, eating, sleeping, playing, real estate. And as much as we like making these real estate videos for YouTube, we are licensed in the state of Colorado, so give us a call, text, or email if you're looking at buying, selling, or investing here in Northern Colorado. We have got your back. Now, without any further delay, let's jump into today's video, the Land Development Code in Fort Collins, Colorado. Let's go. When the city of Fort Collins City Council began looking at this big change to the Land Use Code about 15 months ago, they had certain goals that they were going to abide by, and there was housing strategic plans, carbon neutral goals, different things really came in to develop this new Land Development Code. And there were 5 goals that the city was looking to accomplish. Number 1, increase the housing capacity and availability and ability for affordable housing. Number 2, increase housing affordability near high transit and public transportation areas. Number 3, allow a diversity of housing choices in and around different areas of Fort Collins. Number 4, allow the Land Use Code, now Land Development Code, to be more easily understood. And 5, increase the predictability of the development review process. Now, with those 5 goals in mind, there were 19 major changes, but really kind of come down to a handful that impact what the city of Fort Collins real estate market is going to do and how it might look moving forward. Now, it's worth mentioning that this Land Development Code is pretty divisive. I would say there are a significant amount of people that are excited about this, but there are also a significant amount of people that are concerned. And I think both sides have justifications. Now, while the narrative is that this was kind of shoved and kind of passed along underneath the table, this Land Development Code strategic team had the last 15 months and did significant public outreach. They definitely allowed for and provided different news articles, meetings, conversations to be had for those that were interested. And I would say I was one of the individuals that saw that this was happening, but didn't really think too much of it. Maybe, that like there was gonna be some small changes, like no big deal. This is just gonna be, hey, you're gonna be able to add an extra 200 square feet to your house, and instead of it taking three years, it's gonna take 6 months. Big whoop. But there were in fact significant changes with this Land Development Code. But over the last 15 months, this team built a new Land Development Code, brought it in front of City Council, had different readings and suggestions and changes, and then had 2 different times that it was voted on. The first initial vote, the first reading, passed 6-1, with the only dissenting vote was Kelly Olson, which kind of dig Kelly for it being the only dissenting vote. He just continually he provides such a great view of what he thinks Fort Collins should be. And I do think that he has Fort Collins at the forefront of his mind, but the dude is just always no. Like he, it's kind of, I don't want to say any, derogatory words about him, because I kind of dig what he does as far as, puts what he feels Fort Collins should do best. And he doesn't care what anyone else thinks. So being the only vote, non-yes vote, it's kind of cool. So good on you, Kelly. But on the second reading on November 1st, it did pass again 5-2. So very strong in favor City Council for this Land Development Code. And we will again go over what some of these major changes are so that you can take this information and understand maybe some potential future opportunities. We are going to kind of make this into a 2 or 3 part series of, what might this change for investors? And if you're buying a property, what would I look for moving forward now and moving forward? But today is just kind of a broad overview of what some of these changes are. So over the last 15 months, they built this land development code and changes, and there were really 19 significant changes that took place. But really, we can kind of clump them into a few groupings that kind of consider housing capacity that is projected to increase by over 50% over the next 20 years. I mean, that's a significant change. And we're working with clients from across the country, and we do have some clients, specifically an architect from California, that said, hey, this is going to be big for affordable housing. We are going to be able to take some opportunities, some houses, some areas that might not have been able to provide an affordable housing option just based off of the zoning or area. And now that kind of opens up. And so it'll be interesting of how this changes. Part of me does think that, like the CSU football stadium, when this was going through city council and getting passed, and it was again very divisive, and people were concerned about traffic, noise, partying, and really, yes, while there is traffic and noise and partying, it's 6-7 days a year, and it really hasn't sufficed to much of anything. So I think it's going to be similar to that, in that, yes, these are big changes, and it's the first change in 25 years. But I think there'll be a minimal amount of people, or the minimal amount of populace, that actually takes advantage or makes changes due to these land development codes. But yes, I do see a housing capacity increase over the next 20 years, most definitely. But that being said, City Council voted on this 6-1, 5-2, and while yes, it was passed just the day before the national election, so there were some just kind of unnerving feelings for some of the populace here in Fort Collins of like, how'd you guys pass this? Okay, they did do their outreach, but people like myself even, were ignorant to the big changes that were taking place. And again, that's on me. That's not on City Council. That's not on this team that built this new land development code. They gave us our opportunity to look into it. We just didn't think it was really going to take place, I don't think. And then when it did, everyone's like, holy cow, what are we going to do now? And a previous council member, Ross Cuniff, has put together a coalition to try to overturn this land development code. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think it is here to stay. It is rock solid foundation and moving forward, so we will absolutely see. Alrighty, now, what are some of these changes? We're just gonna go over and discuss kind of the big changes, things to take into consideration when and if you're considering buying here in Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, developing, selling, all this kind of different things. And the first one is the review process is going to be streamlined. And while I don't necessarily know the ins and outs of the entitlement process for the development, process for building big subdivisions, I do know that builders, while it used to take maybe 12 to 20 months, are now 24, 36 months plus to get a project through the entitlement process and a shovel into the ground. So that's important. And something that is going to happen is they have pretty much done away with neighborhood meetings. So if a residential project meets the building and criteria and checks all of the boxes, this is going to go through a basic review process and get approved much quicker without the input of the city and neighborhoods behind it. Now, before people get too excited about that, there is absolutely a process. Houses and developments are supposed to send out a notice to an 800-foot radius of those homes around them. And if there is a concern, they can put in an appeal. If this project gets approved, they have to do it within 14 days. And at that point, it goes to the Planning and Zoning Board for them to take a look at this project. And if that gets approved, they can appeal that decision, and that can go to City Council for their final decision. So, if there is truly a project that people are concerned about around their house, they can absolutely still have a say. Here's one that I'm super excited about. I don't have too much experience about this with other major metros or major cities, but they are going to allow ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in any residential zone across Fort Collins. Now there are building standards. They can't, based off of the square footage of the house and the lot size, it's probably going to be between a 600 to 1,000 square foot maximum sized ADU that would be allowed to be built on a piece of property, whether that's an attached, kind of in a basement, or a detached ADU that's above a garage, or even just a little standalone granny flat that, allows people to build an accessory dwelling unit on their home. And they're not going to need to bring in new water or new utilities. They can build on land that they already own, on water that they also already owned. This is a massive, massive change that I could see increasing housing capacity across Fort Collins. In fact, I reached out to a client and said, hey, Joe, I know you've been looking for a property that either has an ADU on it or, something to take a look at where you could buy maybe next door neighbors so that your dad could move in with you and grow old in the home and you could care for him nearby. Well, with this change, any property with specifications on lot and house size can in fact now have an ADU on it. Big change. One thing that I think is super interesting is in the Old Town, they changed some different zones into Old Town A, OTA, OTB, OTC, essentially low, medium, and high density zones within Old Town. But these houses in these zones can only have a maximum floor space of 2,400 square feet. Now, how they measure floor area is, ground level and above. They do not count basement space unless there's a certain amount of the foundation that is above grade. So that being said, you could absolutely have a 1,200 square foot first floor, 1,200 square foot second floor, and a 1,200 square foot basement. So you could still have a pretty significantly sized house in Old Town. So I'm not necessarily saying that that's a big deal, but they are limiting the size of these houses in the Old Town area. And a big reason for that is so that they can maximize the lot size and how many homes can be put in here. Again, one of the things that they're trying to do is increase capacity around walkable public transportation zones, because one of our goals here in Fort Collins is a carbon neutral footprint by 2050. And a lot of that's going to be built based off of traffic. So if they can decrease the amount of traffic that people do by increasing the capacity of homes and houses around these areas, that could definitely decrease these carbon emissions. So a maximum floor size of 2,400 square feet in the Old Town zones. Which then is kind of part two. They decreased the size minimal divisible lot from 6,000 square feet to 4,500 square feet. Which, if you look at it, that means you could take a 9,000 square foot lot now and potentially subdivide it into two separate lots of 4,500 square feet, where you used to have a 12,000 square foot lot to divide it into two 6,000 square foot lots to have two separate parcels. And that's a very, very big change. Now there will absolutely be some ancillary costs. I reached out to a couple builders, and they suggested really anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 on the fees, the architectural or the surveys, just a lot of ancillary fees, and you got to take into consideration a lot of different things, the process, the timing, everything like that. But assume that if you were wanting to do that, it would cost you anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 to divide your lot into two separate parcels. They're going to reduce the parking requirements, specific really for one bedrooms and studios, to where for a studio, and you used to have 1.5 parking spaces per bedroom, and now you are going to have one. So you could absolutely now develop pretty a small fourplex, 4 studios that or 1 bedrooms that are now only having to have 4 parking spaces, where you'd used to have 6 parking spaces for that same fourplex of 1 bedrooms, which, land is money, land is value. And so 2 parking spots, is pretty significant amount of space taken up. And so again, the intent behind it is to be able to increase the housing capacity while decreasing the amount of land needed to build those housing units. Now, one of the last big changes that they are doing is they are increasing incentives for affordable housing. So, essentially, if you are wanting to build a triplex on a residential lot, one of those has to be an affordable house, or built into it be affordable housing. And you have to have that deeded for 99 years moving forward. So you can't just come into things with like just strictly financial eyes. You do have to take into consideration housing needs of the community. So the city wants to make sure that affordable housing is at the forefront of some of these developments and development needs. So it's pretty cool in that regard that, yes, hey, you can put a duplex here all day long, but if you want to put a triplex, yes, you can do it. But we are going to require that one of those units remains income restricted based off of the area median income. Now, these are just some of the largest changes that the Land Development Code, which I guess we'll mention that now while we're at it. It used to be called the Land Use Code. We are now changing that name into the Land Development Code moving forward so that, there's some clarity on what in fact that this code has its intentions for. But there are other changes that have come into play, and we will discuss those in future videos. But here, moving forward, this is the first time this code has changed in the last 25 years. And there are significant impacts when the statistics and predictions are that it could potentially increase the housing capacity by 53%, and in and around transit areas by over 60%. Now, what actually happens will be, time will tell. But I will say the conversation is just beginning. If you're looking for more information or want to discuss this further, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to talk to you. And again, future videos coming up are going to be talking about what potentially you could look for as far as investments and what might this look like for Fort Collins moving forward into the future. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.